next episode, there's going to be some seriously messed up stuff where Clayface is going to be sent in to try to mess with the police department to buy Hugo Strange some time to get away. I do have a feeling that I'm really hoping they don't kill Clayface off because I mean, there's so many things here, like Firefly in the comics and in previous versions has been a man, so I'm kind of worried that we might see some of these characters get killed off just so that they can have different versions later on.
Which is a big possibility. I have, of course, one unique theory, and not so much theory. I believe this season is definitely going to end as a cliffhanger. If you watch a lot of different shows, cliffhangers are really kind of huge this year. The Walking Dead had one. Game of Thrones of last year had another. And cliffhangers can be a really, really important thing. I do believe the very last thing we're going to see on the last episode is kind of the silhouette of Jerome's face and his signature laughter.
That might be a really good way to go for it. I would think, just even if we just go off and at the end of this season we see Hugo Strange in his new lab talking with his assistant, and they walk up to one of those little tube chambers, and we see his face.
Yeah, I believe like it would show a lot more justice if he actually was alive when we finally do see him, especially as a character of his caliber. Whether or not he is the Joker is beyond argument at this point. It's more or less he is a very important character. He definitely brought out a lot of talks, a lot of confusion, a lot of conversation about who he was. I think he's vital to the show going forward.
Yeah, and again, if you at the beginning of the season or when Jerome was killed off on the show, they were talking about how he was. I mean, the Jerome's father went off and made a prophecy about him, about how he would be kind of like a disease, and we saw how the way he behaved went off and caused other people to kind of go off and start getting that same sort of madness that Jerome seemed to have.
Yeah. What actually really catches my attention really is I wonder if those creatures or people brought back from the dead actually age. Because if they don't age after they're brought back from the dead, because ultimately your skin is dead, it's not growing, things like that, it makes you really question if Jerome then is Joker, because then he wouldn't be able to age or grow into an adult Joker if that was the case.
It's quite possible. One thing I do like about the idea of Jerome being the Joker was that there's a line that was used, I believe, in not the kill. What is it? The Killing Joke, I believe it is, and where he goes off and when someone asks about his origin, and he says that he prefers his origin to be multiple choice. And so I kind of get the impression, because of the way that some of these people are coming back where they don't really remember who they are, that it would be a great explanation as to why the Joker is the way he is.
Yeah, and that's exactly what my opinion was, and why I'm actually looking at the fact of him coming back from the dead is because of that theory, right? Is Hugo Strange creates the character for him, but at the same point, I think maybe he's going to create his own persona. I think the certain maniacal level of the Joker or Jerome, whatever you want to call him, is still there, just not so much realization of who he is. So he's actually going to come up with his own persona, his own name, and his own reality.
That's quite possible. Guys, though, we could probably talk about Gotham for another 40 minutes, but you know what? We're going to go for a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the whole phenomena where, people don't really die in TV and movies these days. So, you know what? We'll be back in about 45 seconds. So, run to the bathroom real quick.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Captain Fizz and Mask Guy show. If you were tuning in earlier, which I don't see why you wouldn't be,
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
we were talking about Gotham and how a lot of characters are coming back from the dead. So this pretty much goes into our next segment, which is the whole persona in Hollywood now and comic books of bringing characters back from the dead.
Well, this isn't even necessarily something brand new, but it's been around for forever. But I mean, it's common knowledge that people never stay dead in comic books.
Yeah.
So I mean, all you have to do is look at the death of Superman, where I mean, it was the whole concept behind the death of Superman was they were supposed to do a storyline, leading up to Superman marrying Lois Lane. That had to be delayed, so they came up with the idea of killing Superman off. And there was a lot of there wasn't so much a lot of backlash when he was killed off. There was a lot of backlash when he was brought back. But at that time, I mean, that was a pretty big deal when he returned from the dead, so to speak.
Oh.
But now, I mean, it's really a very common thing.
I find right now, and just because I have dealt with this on multiple TV shows across multiple TV channels and universes of them killing off a character or pretending to kill off a character and then bringing them back. You got The Walking Dead who has done it, with Glenn, and you got Game of Thrones with Jon Snow. And I believe The Flash actually just had killed off Barry and then brought him back.
They thought Barry was in last week's episode, or 2 weeks ago on the Flash. It looked like Barry was dead; his body disintegrated. What we really found out is that he was actually inside the Speed Force. But I mean, even then, I mean, there was other characters on that show as well as on Arrow who we thought were dead, only for them to show up later on. So I mean,
same with Agent Coulson, who was killed off in, of course, the Avengers, but then brought back in Agents of Shield.
Exactly.
Which ultimately we had originally, predicted or thought it was going to be under a different timeline before, the Avengers, things like that.
Well, we knew it was going to be afterwards. There had been talk: is he a clone? Is he a robot? And then, I mean, the explanation that they came up with was really good. I'm gonna kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit. I discovered that next season, ABC is moving Agents of Shield to a 10 p.m. time slot to allow the show to venture into darker waters, so to speak. So that is very interesting. I gotta admit, guys, I haven't really been watching a lot of TV, but last week I caught up on Gotham so that you and I could talk about this week. I watched last week's episode of Agents of Shield, which I thought was great. I thought Flash was absolutely great as well. So I'm really looking forward to being able to sit down and to watch some of this stuff, even if I have to cuddle my sleeping son in my arms tonight.
Now, I know this is kind of something that's been done, many, many years and across many, many different platforms. Do you feel, though, that the whole pretending to be dead or faking dead or bringing people back from the dead is becoming overblown in today's age?
I think to a certain degree, it definitely is. When they went off and killed Phil Coulson off in the first Avengers movie, I mean, that really went off and added to the movie and brought the Avengers together. But I mean, when they decided to do the show, they needed a familiar person to go off and to do it, and they can't afford to have a movie star of the caliber of Samuel Jackson to go off and to do it. So to bring in Phil Coulson, who was absolutely adored during the first series of movies leading up to Avengers, made a lot of sense. But to go off and to do it on other shows and to do it a lot, it really goes off and really cheapens the value.
Well, I definitely agree with that, especially if you look. If we're going to do this again. We're going to bring up The Walking Dead. Earlier in the season, they had faked Glenn's death, made a really big deal about it. And all these things threaded out between, I believe it was 4 episodes. And they didn't have him appear in the show. They took his name off the credits. all these things to really convince people that he was dead, only to bring him back. And now, of course, at the end of the season, they leave a cliffhanger of who Negan kills, and there's that potential, that Glenn is finally dead, and you got to question like, if you pretend to kill a character off, no matter who it is on what show, does it not belittle their death when it finally does happen?
I'm not sure. I think if you go off and you play with people's emotions too much, I mean, honestly, the show like The Walking Dead, there's bound to be death. That's just, this is a post-apocalyptic world here, so it's bound to happen. But to go off in, so major characters are going to die all the time. Game of Thrones, no one is safe in Game of Thrones. That has been, the story from day one. But people who've read the books were well aware that Jon Smith, Jon Snow, pardon me, did manage to survive, or at least was brought back from the dead, because of the Red Witch.
But like and with at least with that, it did follow the novels pretty good. But with The Walking Dead, or shows like Agents of Shield, The Flash, they're following different scripts. They're not following an actual TV script, or comic book script, things like that. So it really adds a different level. Like, yeah, okay, you're pulling heartstrings. Oh, my favorite character died, and things like that. But then when you find out they're alive, yeah, you're happy. But now it really kind of cuts down your emotion when they finally do kill them off, whether it be that season, the next season, or later on. You really don't feel like you actually care anymore, because they were, deep in the back of your head, you're always thinking, is this actually real, or are they doing it again?
I don't know. Obviously, without question, you're a far more cynical person than I am. I tend to, when someone dies, it's a big deal. I know that, again, going back to Agents of Shield, tonight on the series finale, or season finale, pardon me, someone died. I'm really glad that I'm not on social media, because I really want to go off and watch this episode and find out who it is. Because honestly, for the most part, unless you're Grant, if once you're dead, you're dead. You don't come back as some powerful mutant, or pardon me, inhuman. There's no mutants in the Marvel cinematic or television universe. It's Inhumans.
Which honestly, in my world, is no different.
There really isn't that much difference at all. You might as well, a rose by any other name smells just as sweet. So, who would have thought? We use some Shakespeare on here.
Hey, we did Yoda before the show.
Hey, do or do not. There is no try.
Yes. That's Sith talk there.
Yes, it's only a Sith goes off and speaks.
So I like watching the deaths on TV shows. It definitely brings out an emotion, but faking too many of them definitely ruins it for me, I think.
Again, I think deaths need to be done sparingly, because it absolutely, it does go off and kind of cheapens the impact. It's minor characters that you barely had the chance to go off into, get introduced to. That's one thing.
Well, yeah.
Like major characters, yeah, you can't go off and cheapen.
We'll go back and we'll talk about another one that actually we've speculated on, and it kind of goes with it. Darth Maul from Star Wars. They made this big deal when he died in Phantom of the Menace, episode 1, I believe it was. And now, like I believe it's called Star Wars Rebels, a new TV series, or
they brought. What happened is we found out that Darth Maul